Good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to tonight's standing committee meeting. I will call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer. Here. Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will kick off tonight's standing committee meeting with a section of Finance and Business Operations Committee with a City Council email system discussion given or presented by staff member Information Systems Manager Julie Sorensen. Julie?
Hello. I just wanted to go through and discuss some changes that have been happening in the email system because we've been having some problems getting things going to you. So just give you a little timeline of what had happened. July 1st, we had to shut down our web access to our cedarfalls.com email domain. It was deemed too risky to allow any access to that system with a web protocol. So this shut down access for you guys to a cedarfalls.com email address. Many of you had already set up external emails that you had maybe during the election. And that was just anything sent to cedarfalls.com was automatically forwarding on to your external email. So really, you guys didn't notice if you were utilizing that external email to get all of your emails that come through to cedarfalls.com. In September, we migrated all of these cedarfalls.com email addresses to the cloud. So we still had the same forwarding rules in place. However, we found out soon that once we had a hosted solution, those forwardings weren't working. So everything that was going to cedarfalls.com didn't quite get to your external email addresses. So September 21st, I sent out an email saying City Council external email addresses weren't forwarding to the Cedar Falls, your cedarfalls.com to your external address. Gave you access or information on how to access cedarfalls.com through a web browser or through a mobile app. And at that time, we took your external email addresses and we put it inside the DL for the City Council DL, because that's what's on the website if somebody wants to get a hold of you with one email. It utilizes that City Council DL. We finally finished up our project in November, and we've closed out the migration, validated our email security controls with the configurations that are expected by our cybersecurity insurance. We did repeated tests to make sure that the cedarfalls.com domain is not a spoofable domain as we tighten these configurations down. Recently, we were made aware that some of your emails were bouncing back when you were utilizing that Cedar Falls City Council DL. First of all, we had a couple forwarding rules that were still there, so we took care of that. But in the last couple of weeks, we've been made aware of additional errors that we've been receiving when utilizing the City Council DL. At that time, I sent an email to make sure you knew the potential and that you were not getting all of the cedarfalls.com emails passing through to your external ones that you set up. And we started to investigate the errors. After further investigation, the errors are a result of those configurations that we put in place in November. So because of that, when you took an email and you sent it to that Cedar Falls DL, that City Council DL, and tried to go on to everybody else's external email, the receiving email kicked it back, saying, hey, this really doesn't look right because it started at Gmail, it went to cedarfalls.com, and now it's going to AOL. And AOL goes, this looks fishy, I'm not even going to open it. So that's what's happening and why we're getting those kicked back. Wanted to be sure that this was truly the case, so I asked our vendor who imported or migrated it for us, our third party, to look at the errors to make sure that that's truly what's happening. And he said we can't do the external forwarding anymore. It's not best practice to allow external forwarding. As a matter of fact, it's a risk. It's not recommended at all to allow relaying to external recipients. IT staff has to not only maintain functionality, but you have to protect the city's data. Is that all in all, it would be preferred if the users would send from the cedarfalls.com account instead of using personal or their external Gmail, AOL, whatever accounts. He said you could probably add these as an exception to the configurations that the cybersecurity insurance is expecting us to have configured, but it's not safe practice to do so. So furthermore, I have to attest that I have these settings in place to our cybersecurity insurance to say I have got all these configurations in place, and that gives us lower rates or at least coverage. At some point, they won't even cover you if you don't have these set. So we're having issues getting all our emails to you. And root of the problem is it's that external email. We have some options, I guess. You can still utilize that external email, but we'd have to get rid of that DL. So that one-stop shop on the website wouldn't be allowed for citizens to be able to email everybody. You could we'd have to change the way some citizens probably communicate with you. I'm sure some citizens probably just do the citizens, for Dunn or Cyrus for Iowa, or whatever that you guys set up for your external emails. I'm sure they're used to just communicating back and forth with that. So we wouldn't have to change that if they're used to that, or are they used to doing the DL, We have to change. So either one we're gonna have to change. And then there'd be website updates, just a little bit. A couple of you have cedarfalls.com on the website yet. Or we can stay with cedarfalls.com. It's actually the best practice. I actually polled about 10 other IT managers throughout the United States, and they said all of them came back and said, you give a domain email address to your elected officials. And the main point of that is because of public records requests. They want those emails to stay on that server or on that domain. It also gives us the ability to use an e-discovery tool for public record requests on the Cedar Falls domain. And then it just, it helps you too. It kind of protects you. You wouldn't have to deal with going through your external AOL accounts for public records requests. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. And I know there was some feedback that you really didn't want to give those external email addresses up. I don't know. I think best practice would stay with cedarfalls.com, but I'm opening it up to you guys.
Okay, any questions, concerns, conversation regarding this information? Yes, Councilman Harding.
Check. Sorry, this one was really loud earlier. Didn't want to explode. If we stay with the Cedar Falls, I'm okay with that. I understand the reason why. Can you help me set up my Cedar Falls one
Yes.
on my phone?
Yeah, we
Or
can
on my
provide.
computer?
We can provide a device for you too, like a tablet. But yes, we have an app, or it's on through a browser. So yes, either or.
Okay. I don't need another device. I appreciate it though, but I
Yeah.
have a lot of devices.
I know.
So thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Councilman Schultz.
So the email address that I started 14 months ago on council, the email address that was set up, that was given to me at that time and then didn't work,
Yep.
that would be the one we'd go back to?
Yep.
Okay. And that's the recommendation from the legal standpoint too, if we need to get records and such? Okay.
I know. Yeah.
But we're good this time?
We should be good this time.
Okay. But we won't be able to forward, even if that gets established, then I won't be able to forward to my CFU account?
Exactly. If you would do it on a one-on-one basis, I think you would be able to. I mean, as long as we have the record. We can't do it automatically through the DL, through an automatic rule. You have to go into that cedarfalls.com and manage it.
Okay.
Yes, Councilwoman DeBoer.
If we chose not to have any email, you'd take ours off of the website, and it would go back to the way it used to be, where it said our phone number. Call us. Would that be an option?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly just do a phone call and take the email out. I mean, I'd take it off cedarfalls.com, and I wouldn't have any forwarding rules or anything like that.
But then I wouldn't have to have multiple devices with multiple emails.
Correct.
Yes, Councilman Ganfield?
Sure.
Okay,
One
sorry.
call. I think it makes the most sense, and it is the cleanest to go to the Cedar Falls domain. The question in my mind, if we set up our own rules to forward that Cedar Falls domain out, wouldn't we potentially run into the same bounce back from the other domain?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you
the
would.
safest and
You would.
cleanest would be,
Yeah.
stop using personal accounts, and that way the records requests and all that thing that
Yes.
comes through the cedarfalls.com
Yep.
account. I guess I understand the resistance to that, but I understand it's pretty common practice, so appreciate your recommendation.
I'm going to speak real quick just because I will plead my ignorance sometimes to technology. So I agree with the best practice. Would one option be so that when people, because I really don't want to sit there and pay attention to multiple email accounts, couldn't you like set up a response to people when they did use your old one saying, hey, this is no longer my,
Yes.
where I'm replying
Yep.
and shoot me an email this way?
Yep.
Great,
You could definitely do that.
great.
My email on record or whatever is
Yeah,
cedarfalls.com.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or concerns or anything that's needed from us? Do we just kind of need like consensus? I think, do we have consensus to go with the best practice of cedarfalls.com?
I guess for cleanliness sake, I would make a motion
Yeah.
to move over to the cedarfalls.com server from this point forward.
Sounds good. Anyone want to second that?
Second.
All right. Motion and second. Any further discussion regarding this topic?
I guess, Madam
Yes.
Chair, just for my own peace of mind, Julie, who all has access to the Exchange server to be able to do those records requests?
Who has access? Well, it's cloud-based, but yeah, the administrators, Pat and myself, and that's it right now, would do that.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns regarding the
Question.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
You say right now 2 people have access, but who in the future could? I mean, how secure is this as far as other people looking?
We would have to
I'm
give
not
it-
excited about giving up my individual, in this case, AOL account.
Right. We would have to give permission, administrative permission to that person. So it would be a role that we would do, and they'd have to have admin permissions. So a new system person or
So-
something like that.
So, general city staff, not in the tech department, wouldn't have access.
Correct.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm not excited about giving up my individual account, so I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, so we can talk about it more.
Yes,
Question.
Councilman Harding.
Just a question. I mean, this wouldn't preclude us from using that account, our other external account. I mean, not to say that you recommend that,
Right.
but as a council person, we could still communicate with people with the email address we have set up. It would just be that anything that was sent to all council members would go to that other, would go to the cedarfalls.com email, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to look at Kevin for this, because if you do choose to do business on that external AOL, Gmail, whatever account, it would open that account up for public records. So
Yeah.
we would have to have you manage those public record requests if it comes.
Like
Is
we
that
do
correct?
now.
Which is what we're doing right now.
Yep,
So, okay. I was just
yeah.
wanted to know.
I guess we'd want to know if you were doing that.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, ultimately, I think so many people communicate with me on the one that I've had for the past 3 years
Understand.
that I can
gonna be
always
a hard
CC and say, like, please send it over here, but there's going to be no way that I'm going to be able just to cut that email off for at least many months until it starts to see no traffic.
Yep, I understand. Yep.
Any other questions, concerns, Councilwoman DeBoer?
Well, we're already not getting our emails. So when you make this change going to just the cedarfalls.com,
If you go in there, you'll notice that most of these emails are in that cedarfalls.com account.
how do you
It's
even
just they're
get
not-
into a cedarfalls.com account when I don't have one?
Well, I sent instructions back in September, and I can do it again. Yes, when you set up your external, that forwarding, you always had an account in cedarfalls.com. We just forwarded anything on to you. So any of those DLs are in that cedarfalls.com account. And now that we're hosted, we can't forward it, doesn't allow it.
So Julie,
I got a question.
One second. Okay, so first I'm going to, Director Rodenbeck is trying to speak. Director Rodenbeck?
no, I was just going to
Okay.
mention, Julie, you mentioned before too to Councilman Harding if Ms. DeBoer would like a separate device
Yes.
too to set that up, or if that's easier. I think they're offering that up too, so whichever's easiest.
Okay. And Councilman Cruz, go ahead.
So you're saying then on the Cedar Falls website you will no longer publish my AOL account, or can we still have that published along with this cedarfalls.com email?
I think if it's best practice to use cedarfalls.com, I would probably change them all to be cedarfalls.com email addresses.
And
But we can't keep, I still prefer to keep my individual, I guess is what I'm saying. Because there's a lot of people that have that and correspond that way.
Understand? I think Kelly's suggestion is probably the best with that, just to try to forward as much communication as you can to the cedarfalls.com. But yeah, we can't keep people from using that.
I think in the end, it's going to be a consensus that kind of drives the change. So that's what we're talking about right now, even though we all have different feelings about it. Councilman Sires.
This was July of 22, Julie, to September of 22,
Yep,
to November of 22, correct? Those were the 3 dates you used, July.
that is correct.
September.
Yep.
Of 22. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or concerns regarding the motion to move the council emails to the cedarfalls.com, and the second on that, any further council discussion? Okay, so with that, let's do a voice vote. So all those in favor, and the motion again is to change from our own individual outside emails to council having cedarfalls.com emails for best practice. All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
No.
Okay, so I think,
Show of hands just in
yeah,
case.
show of hands just in case. So the ayes. Okay, we got 4 ayes. And the nays. And Councilman Cruz, yes. Okay, so we got 3 nays. So consensus to go ahead and move towards the cedarfalls.com.
Okay. I'll send out instructions again.
I love that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Can you also make sure that you take off the website our emails?
Yep.
If we're not going to be able to use them for city purposes, they shouldn't be, our private ones shouldn't be on there,
Right,
at least for people to set up as a group message.
as a group message.
Yeah, if you're sending it to multiple ones of us, is what you're trying to eliminate, right? Not
Well-
just if they wanted to send one just to me.
Exactly. So if they wanted, let me, so I would take your email that you have on the website now off completely. is
Because
what
you're going to
saying.
switch it to this
Yeah.
cedarfalls.com one. So then people won't even be able to know how to get it.
They would be able to email to you, yeah. And then you'd have to have the instructions to get in to get that.
Madam Chair?
Yeah,
I think it'd be good just reiterate the standard naming convention for our individual accounts as well as the city account, as folks may be watching.
Yeah, it's
So-
first name dot last name at cedarfalls.com.
And then what is the approved group distribution list?
It's City Council DL, or City Council, it's a hyperlink on the website.
So the hyperlink on the website is probably the most reliable, as it will be updated if any changes
Exactly.
are needed. So citycouncil@cedarfalls.com will get to us all.
Yep,
I've noticed an email that came in with a different one, so I just wanted to reiterate that's the preferred usage.
yeah.
And the
If you wanna
distribution
do
list would
all-
be internal to Exchange.
Yes,
So for
correct.
folks out there,
Yes,
citycouncil@cedarfalls.com. Perfect.
So to simplify it more, it's kind of like when you go get a new job and you get your email at your new job. It's your first name dot last name at the job place. And so you still have email. It's just you're no longer using your private one that you had it before.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question.
And
1 second here, Councilman Harding. Go ahead.
we've really always had these. It's
Correct.
just that we haven't, we had to had some issues with hosting and stuff, and so now we have a new host, and we're updating everything for our cybersecurity. So we've all had these, and I guess we can get them on our phones, or and get it linked up, because it's just through Microsoft, right?
Correct.
So, all right, I did see your instructions, by the way, and I tried, but I couldn't.
You couldn't get it?
I couldn't get in because I couldn't remember my password, which is my fault.
Yep.
So I'll be visiting you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilman Cruz.
Question. I noticed I have one that's Daryl.Cruz, the number 2 at cedarfalls.com.
They both
So do
go,
I have?
they both
So do
go.
I have 2? One's just Daryl Cruz at Cedar Falls, and the other
Yep.
is Daryl Cruz 2. Why would I have 2 of them?
I can't remember why we had to set that up. I think it was because of the contact of forwarding it, actually. So it is first name dot last name at cedarfalls.com. We had to set that second one up in order to forward it to you. So both of them go to the same mailbox. First name, last name, cedarfalls.com.
All right.
Sorry.
Councilman Banfield.
Hopefully last question, we don't want to beat this, but what's the retention policy on the cedarfalls.com email domain? Do we have a
We really don't.
expiration date? Okay, perfect.
So I can go in there and look at what I've got sitting there that hasn't forwarded?
Correct.
Yep.
And to be fair, that was the
All right.
instructions we all got months ago, right? I apologize. I will admit yeah. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, so that wraps up this portion of the Standing Committee meeting. And next we have the Public Safety Committee.
Oh, I think. Thanks. All right. Welcome to the Public Safety Standing Committee portion of tonight's meeting. I've placed at Council Dais here a quick agenda that we set internally. I'd like to just see if we could take maybe 3 minutes each individually to just ask ourselves a few questions before we get our discussion underway tonight. So I've said to set intentions, I want to ask, how do you want to listen? And how do you want to be heard? In responding to those questions, I'd like you to each answer that with a 1-word or more answer for yourself, and go ahead and jot it down. I'd like us to think about what we want to accomplish and then choose to take steps towards accomplishing that goal together tonight. So I'd ask for a brief, about 3 minutes to take care of that individually. right, Denny. Looks like most have stopped writing. I know as unconventional as that may be for our standing committees and for some of our council, I find that helpful. If there are brave souls that would care to share how they want to listen tonight, I would entertain that input.
I wrote proactively.
I didn't hear you.
Simon wrote proactively.
I said I wrote proactively.
Openly.
Okay.
I wrote that for hearing, be heard openly.
You were wrong there.
Well, I was going to say great minds think alike.
Oh. See, my next one's respectfully, and I'm already messing that up.
I wrote as I want to listen as coachable and teachable. How do others want to be heard as we engage tonight?
Respectfully.
Open-mindedly.
That's what I said too.
See, great minds think alike. All right. I appreciate you guys sharing and taking that second. So, I mean, one of the reasons that we meet as a committee is to be able to talk about things together and talk about what we want and what we don't want and see if we can come to some compromise. In light of some of the conversation that's gone on around this particular topic, I wanted to share a few things. So if I could, take a few moments to clarify the purpose of tonight's meeting, possibly by way of a timeline review. This meeting topic was not a here we go again item as the courier insinuates, but rather a necessary intermediate step in the continuation of a previously approved committee agenda item. In early 2022, it was referred to committee to identify possible funding sources for a public safety assessment and to select a firm to perform that assessment. Committee meetings were scheduled to review possible funding sources, but never held to select a firm to perform the assessment. That latter topic was then postponed to goal setting of 2022. During goal setting this past November, a consensus was gathered to postpone the selection of a firm to a later meeting, whether a work session or a committee meeting, I don't currently recall. While this conversation to come may have been more fitting for a work session, I referred the topic of drafting an RFP to the Public Safety Committee to allow for public input should any be desired, because we don't allow for public input at our work sessions. Tonight's conversation is simply an opportunity for the committee members to work together to build consensus on what we would like included in that assessment, so that we can draft a clear and concise request for proposal where we'd be searching for any capable entities to respond with their terms so that we may possibly select one if the council chooses to do so at a future date. It would be unwise to choose a firm without any defined scope, as this committee discussed and stated last year, hence the postponement to goal setting and further postponement to a later date. Now, because we've had so much turmoil around the mere mention of public safety from this group, I wanted to clarify a couple more items. As requested by some residents even today who wrote, it is imperative that the Cedar Falls City Council is able to pronounce that the Public Safety Department in Cedar Falls is effective and that it is fulfilling its mission of community safety. I, as a single voice, would like to state the Public Safety Department in Cedar Falls is effective and that it is fulfilling its mission of community safety. I would like to now ask for a show of hands of all council members that are willing that agree with that statement. The Public Safety Department in Cedar Falls is effective and that it is fulfilling its mission of community safety. I would also like to state, thank you. I would also like to state that it is important to follow through on the plans that framed our current public safety methodology, which included lots of items for ongoing review and assessment, as we will discuss in greater detail later tonight, as requested by our Public Safety Director. In that vein, I would also state that it is wise to assess the performance of our current public safety practices, sharing our accomplishments, as well as identifying opportunities. And I'd now ask for a show of hands of all council members that agree that it is good practice to ensure we have the best public safety department possible. If you agree that that's our aim tonight, please raise your hand.
Agreed.
There is nothing overtly political about this in my estimation. We already have an external assessment of our fire rescue department every 5 years by the Insurance Services Office, the ISO, and we have an enviable rating from them. I'm asking for an additional supplemental external assessment because we don't have any external assessment entity for policing or emergency medical operations. In light of our somewhat recent migration to the combined public safety model, which in its own previously adopted implementation plan included ongoing review, and the recommendations received from Cedar Falls Racial Equity Task Force, several of which we have recently implemented, as well as the fact that Cedar Falls is a growing community with medical needs, it only makes sense in my mind to have an external assessment of these services as well. Thank you. So moving on, a request for proposal is simply a document we can send out that should define our project scope and budget. It should provide background and introductory information. It should describe the services we're looking for from this entity, and we should provide detail of our selection criteria and timelines. That is a robust document, and I must admit, I am not experienced in crafting requests for proposal. I've asked our public safety director to provide some of the things they'd want included, and I've listed that as item 3. Director Birdie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be able to give us a crash course of those items, or would you like me to go over them? I didn't put them in front of you. I apologize.
You asked me for things that, we would review or look at. So I took items out of our strategic plan that we work on all the time. So that's what I provided you. So.
Perfect. Those items included things such as review administrative support, review staffing distribution, review most effective schedules, review or replot in some cases, review State of Iowa advanced training certifications. The language in there was previously adopted by this council, so we'd want to ask this entity, in my estimation, to do those things in partnership with us. Council has that in front of them, and for the public's sake, I guess I could read them all, but they are in our previously adopted Public Safety Special Report, and that is a 7-goal document with sub-bullets on each of those goals, which is robust, and it is a method that we can continue, that we can use for continuous improvement for our public safety. In addition to that, then moving on to item 4, what do council members want to see addressed in addition to or instead of those items? I've put some suggestions below, but I'm certainly open to others.
Mr. Chairman,
At this point, I'll turn it over. Go ahead, Councilman Cyrus.
I would like to have you read those goals that Chief Birdie put out,
Sure.
because the people watching at home don't have it in front of them like we do.
Perfect. So to reiterate, within our public safety special report, goal number 1 was achieve optimal staffing. Included in there were a few line items that included things of review. Line item 1 with bullet point 1 was review administrative support for public safety administration, police and fire records, fingerprinting, background checks, Clery reporting. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Review bullet point 2, review staffing distribution for fire and police. Bullet point 3, review most effective fire and police schedules. Goal number 2 was improve departmental practices. Review, replot police patrol areas based on population and city growth trending. Goal number 3, train and certify comprehensively. Review State of Iowa advanced training certifications. Review the feasibility or need for a combined police and fire training facility. Review police shift schedule options to maximize training time. Goal number 4, effectively manage department facilities. Review fire station locations. Review addition of fire station in First Street corridor to improve responses to North and West Cedar Falls. And goal number 7 had another bullet point included, that is support officer well-being. I don't want to skip. Goals 5 and 6 were field new equipment and vehicles and creatively engage the community. Those goals didn't have any specific line items that needed assessment or review currently. Goal number 7, back to that, support officer well-being. We want to review past sick leave usage, workout facilities, access to critical incident debriefings, and mentoring programs, as well as peer support. So those are ongoing review things that our staff do internally, and we would be, with this assessment, asking someone else for essentially a second opinion of, hey, are we doing this really well? So again, in addition to those items, what would council prefer to see? Councilmember DeBoer.
I have 2 questions. The first one, just to help remind me on goal setting. I don't remember that we actually had a consensus or agreement to do assessment need. And so I want to know, did we actually have a vote or a consensus that we agreed to do this? And second, my question is for Director Birdie is, do you need an outside agency to meet these goals or to determine whether you're meeting these goals?
Well, those goals are, part of the steps in our strategic plan. So we would not need an outside agency, but, that's really what you guys are here for tonight, is make that decision. So we wouldn't normally hire an outside agency. Besides, like Councilman Ganfield said, the Insurance Services Organization, every 5 years they take a look at the fire department. But really that ISO rating too is 40% is the fire department, 40% is our water supply, and 20% is dispatch. So even a small part of the ISO rating is the actual fire department, or 40% of it.
Yeah, and to reiterate your other question, Councilmember DeBoer, we had believe it was late winter, early spring consensus to have a committee meeting. I believe it was committee of the whole at the time, to look at possible funding sources and select a firm to do the audit. Again, we did that possible funding sources meeting, but then we postponed the selection of a firm to goal setting, and then further postponed it to an indefinite time in the future. I just think it's unwise to have a meeting where you say, we'd like to pick you, and then afterwards talk about what services they can provide.
Well,
So-
I thought we had consensus to discuss, not to automatically decide we're going to do it, and to move forward with an RFP. Because
Gotcha. Well, my understanding of the committee meeting was that we would at that time talk about what entity would do it and then decide if we were going to contract with one. But again, there's no proposal or contract to discuss. So this is that intermediate step, should we decide to proceed with it. I mean, to Director Birdie's point, the ISO rating that we have, which we are proud of, I believe it's a 3, correct, Director Birdie? Which is great comparatively. It is mostly, water delivery methodology and a little bit of dispatch, which, as we know, there is some discussion about dispatch as well. So that's one entity that helps us. I think it would be good to see what other things we need to address with the other two facets of our public safety as well. Other questions or items to include? Mr. Hackbarth, go ahead.
Yeah, Director Birdie, I wondered if under goal number 6, it'd be beneficial to look at, I understand the university has safety measures and safety departments, but I don't know what connection or collaboration there is there, and I'm just curious as to if that would fall under goal number 6, if you had any more information on that, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, our strategic report has a lot of goals and has a lot of things in it. What this list was just Councilman Ganfield had asked for some things to potentially look at in an external review. So what I did is I sent him, I worked with Chief Howard and Captain Zlondek, and what I sent really was those things that we spent a lot of time on, that review all the time, that are things we're working on. So in our document, though, we have a lot of things under goal 5 and 6 that aren't on here. So, and I can sure get you a copy of that special report.
Other items that folks would want included in a potential RFP? Could we go through the bullet points that we have listed and just see if we want to keep them or strike them?
Mr. Ganfield?
Sure, Councilmember Cruz.
On the police schedules, I'd like to, review 24-hour versus 12-hour versus 8-hour shifts. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about there?
Sure.
Or maybe not necessarily.
Mm-hmm. And Director Birdie, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 24-hour shifts and 8-hour shifts today.
We
Right.
have traditional
24.
24-hour shifts on our fire division. On the police division, we have 8.25-hour shifts. And in my 30 years on the police division, we've had 8-hour shifts, 8.5-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, then 8.5, and then 8.25 now. So, and most of those, besides the 12 hours, were all very similar in how they operate.
Okay. So that's something that we review that in an ongoing fashion internally. What was our most recent review that what we've got going now is what we want to continue with for the foreseeable future? Do you have a time when you reevaluate the shift setup?
Well, the most recent thing really to go on, our fire shifts are traditional shifts that are used across the nation. And on the police shifts, probably the thing we talk about the most is what's the best way to get training time incorporated into your police shifts without incurring overtime. And that really is probably the topic we always get down to. Now, another thing we like in a college community is there a police shift that gives you that overlap from 10 p.m. till 3 a.m. to maybe reduce overtime? But the drawback always is you end up with a lot of people working 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., but you may not need them on Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night. And then you're probably short somewhere else if you've got double staffing during those hours. So there's pros and cons to every shift. Waterloo recently went to 10-hour shift just a year or two ago. So.
Okay. Councilmember Harding.
I'm not really, sure what specifically I would want to see that's not here, but as far as like the exact bullet points. But if council decides to move forward with something like this, then I would want to see a couple things, namely cost, obviously. So asking, which ones cost, why they cost that much, because I'm assuming that if we sent out an RFP, we would get multiple costs from different firms. And then also, what would they want? What do they look for, and how do they assess? Does that make sense? What they would want to look for? What do they do across the country? Because obviously they're the experts, is I guess what I mean.
Sure.
So what would they recommend we look at outside of what we already have here, and why?
Yeah. I think if I understand your couple of comments or questions correctly, you'd want to look at the cost that they would propose to do the services before
Correct.
we engage, which is exactly what we'd come to with our selection committee, if you will, that says, hey, we've received X amount of proposals back as response, and this one's exorbitant versus this one, so we may, suss out which one does fit us better. On the other side of things, having them tell us how they do things is going to be part of that proposal. So we would be in this RFP, I would think it could be concise. I found like a 3-page one. Our city staff sends out a 15-page one recently we sent out a 15-page one for a human resources need that includes our insurance requirements for these entities and things of that nature. So some of it was just exhibits that support what we're asking. But to be as concise as we can, when we talked about this last year, we basically said, well, what are we asking of these consultants, of these firms? And the problem we stumbled on, I thought, was we don't want to tell them the answer we're looking for, right? We don't want a firm to come back in and tell us, this is what you asked us to pay, what you paid us to tell you. So I hesitated to scope it out, but you can't have a firm know exactly how to perform that without telling them some things that are in scope. So for instance, for me, I've been doing a lot of thinking on this over the last year, and it would not be part of my scope to put in this RFP, evaluate our organizational structure and tell us whether we should continue with this model or not. That's not part of the request from my seat. So you can tell in this RFP, you're not looking at reframing our public safety department. We're simply looking at, when you said cost analysis, I thought you meant we'd want them to look at our costs and see how we stack up.
That could be
Could be a bullet point. Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, go ahead, Ms. Councilman.
to follow on Councilman Harding, I want them to come in and tell us how we can be the very best PSO program in the United States so everybody looks towards us.
Yeah.
I've fought all along to keep them separate. I wanted the very best firemen, the very best policemen. But if I'm saddled with this, I want them to come in and say, look, here's what you can do to be the best, and everybody will look at you. That's all I'm after. That's the whole thing. So Simon and I got on here to fight for separate police and fire, and now, since we haven't been able to achieve that, now we better just get the best PSOs we can possibly get. As to the Cleary law, that kind of follows into UNI, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that true, Mr. Birdie?
Yes. Yeah, our part of the Cleary reporting is just, and what Cleary is a law that the universities have to report, the amount of crime they have. So the thing we get is any college that comes to UNI and stays at UNI for anything, so every sports team, every music team, there will be a certain point in the year where that university sends us out a sheet, and it'll say, hey, they need to know about all the crimes that occurred by the Country Inn and Suites from this date and time to this date and time. And that comes from every college, everybody that visits UNI. So it's just a lot for our staff. It's a lot of work for our staff. But that's something that I work with, finance and business operations and city administrator on annually. We talk about staffing and what do we need for administrative support. And we've made adjustments through the years in the amount of staff that we have. It's just there's a lot of reporting with Cleary.
I think in response to that, there would be a specific line in here that we ask them and we inform them who we are. We're a college town, right? We have a university here that we want to serve and protect well. They have a campus police department, and we provide fire services for them. So we would disclose that to any respondent group, but I would ask that they help us identify any potential areas of opportunity for partnership with the university police as well. So, Councilmember Harding.
I did think of something. Since the mayor and whomever else work together to develop the strategic plan we have, correct? I mean, obviously you guys did the work and put it together, but that was about a year and a half ago, maybe?
We did that for about 6 months in 2021. So it was throughout 2021, and the mayor was part of it, and Director Olson and Chief Bostwick and really all the staff. So.
It seems like we've gotten a lot of positive information from that, and we've used it a lot. So maybe just a quick go through that and make sure, can we add anything? Are we missing anything? Just a review of that document. I think the document served us really well. Seems like it's given us a lot of direction and helped us grow.
So in the RFP, we'd be asking this entity to verify, are we operating within this special report? For semantics, it's a public safety special report, which we adopted essentially as a strategic plan. But that could be a bullet point in there that they assess whether we are utilizing that to its fullest potential, correct?
Correct. And if there's anything to add or not that we could look at.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Schultz.
I've got a couple of questions to Director Birdie. Just for clarification, why do we have two chiefs, or I don't want to call you acting chief yet, but why are there two chiefs here?
Why are they here, or why do we have them?
Why do we have them?
Okay. So I was going to say they're here because we told them to be here tonight, but.
Yeah.
Why do we, our structure is, we have a public safety director, and then we have chiefs of both departments. That topic came up, it came up probably last year when you were going to fill the position that I ultimately got. The alternative, you could have two chiefs that direct report to the council, and then most likely they would have assistant chiefs under them at a department our size. And in previous history in Cedar Falls, we've had assistant police chiefs. There was a time where they had multiple assistant police chiefs and multiple assistant fire chiefs if you go a long ways back. So, but our current structure now is a director of public safety and then the two chiefs.
And their roles are to be over?
They're over their respective departments. They really do the operational piece of the police and the fire divisions. I'm more at the executive level and probably a little more of the political piece. So
right now we have separate firefighters and separate police officers on duty right now.
Yes.
And the folks that are on duty as firefighters, how long are they in that assignment?
What they do is every year our officers can bid for their assignment for the following year. They bid by seniority. So each year they can bid whether they want to be on police or fire. So we've only been doing that for about 3 years. And what we've seen is about 2 to 4 people each year have went back and forth. And so, one thing I would say is some movement back and forth is very healthy for the organization, but you also don't want too much because over at Fire they get a lot of advanced certifications through the state of Iowa that we don't need them necessarily to have over on the police side. So we've had about 2 to 4 move back and forth over the last 3 years. It's been a healthy movement, and that's how they do their that's how they do the moves. And one thing to back up a little bit that I think Councilman Cedar said, if somebody did look at us as a PSO program, one of the things, kind of to get to your point, is we really are a separate police division and a separate fire division that help each other all the time, that are cross-trained and help each other often. And so we're a little unique from some public safety departments because they will get down more to where you might have one chief over the whole thing. You might have supervisors that on any given day oversee fire and police at the same time, and we don't do that. So now some of that's probably because we're a relatively new public safety department, but there are all different ways to do public safety.
So currently, to fill, there's 3 fire shifts,
Yes.
and they're, red, green?
Red, blue, and green. They work the
Red, blue, and green. And what is your staffing number to accomplish that?
We have 26 assigned to fire, so 24 of them are on the fire shifts. It's 3 shifts of 8, and then we have a fire inspector and the fire chief's position. And then the balance of the organization is on the police division. But in that number, I also count anybody that might be in field training or hasn't been hired yet, or people that actually are in training or possibly leaving.
And on the police side, there's how many that are?
Well, we have 74 total, so you'd have 49. But of that 49, that would also count anybody who's in the police academy or in field training or who may be out because of an injury and things like that. So.
Okay.
Thanks for answering those questions. Councilmember DeBoer.
Just a quick question, because it's a follow-up to something I heard them say is, if we're going to do this assessment training, I've always thought the best people to ask on what you should be adding would be the people actually doing the work. So wouldn't it be beneficial, I guess this is Director Birdie, would it be beneficial to kind of step back for a couple months and ask the employees or get feedback from the public safety officers on what they would recommend be added?
I guess,
Instead of-
I'd like to ask a couple follow-up questions, because I think in one part, that's kind of what the internal climate survey was pitched as. So we tabled this ongoing discussion until we got those responses back. It wasn't angled in the way it sounds like you're asking now, that, hey, what would you guys see to improve, right? I mean, we don't hire brilliant people and tell them what to do. We hire brilliant people so they can tell us how to do their job better. I like that. That might be helpful, though, and we didn't ask that in that climate survey that we just got back. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, but instead of having another assessment done, can't we do that internally?
Okay.
And it might take a month or two, but it seems like it would be good to hear from them what they would recommend.
Sure.
So if I could follow up with a couple others, what have you seen in the past 3 years with employee overturn?
Our employee turnover, well, we've actually done pretty well. We've had people leave. We've had people leave for other opportunities or maybe more money at another department. But that's something that you'll always see in our line of work. A department our size, whether it's police or fire, people will always leave for larger departments or maybe the FBI or the DCI or things like that on the police side. So we've been pretty stable. Part of the reason that we've been stable is we hired so many over the last 4 years. We've hired about 46 or 47 of our employees have been here 5 years or less. So the majority of the department is very young, because of some significant turnover we had years ago. So that has given some of our stability. But we've had people leave for other jobs and other opportunities.
Yeah, I would follow up with that, Councilmember Schultz. That's why I was talking with Director Gaines about some turnover we had, because other entities were offering more money. So some people left, like Public Works, I think, was one of them, for a trucking job because they were making 6 figures just to drive a truck. I mean, you can't really beat that. I've ridden along with a few of our officers, and I think it's worth noting one of the officers just lauded the praises of our model because they were excited about the opportunity for cross-training and to be able to do both jobs, the challenge that they wanted to rise to. I think we have men and women that are rising to that challenge, sticking their neck out for you and me, that is commendable, and I want to make sure that we do state that we thank them for that service. Another officer that I rode along with talked about their transfer into Cedar Falls recently, and one of their, I guess, feel-good takeaways was, I don't mean to disparage our neighbors, but their previous department, they said, if you were going to get a hello from the citizenry, it was a California howdy with a single finger. But in Cedar Falls, people wave at you when they see the police and the fire going by. And that was just a wonderful change for that individual. So I think people are also joining our department, and they like what it offers, and there is a camaraderie there. I visited with several of our officers at the awards banquet that some of us were at, and the morale there is improving. And they even said after our public safety inclusive survey questions that they had seen a better response. Some of them said, yeah, we've noticed a difference after that survey result. So I think we're in the right direction by asking. So Councilmember DeBurr, I like your idea of continue to ask them, how do we do this together? So I thank you for that input. Back to the line items so that we have something productive. I guess I'd like to see if there is a consensus to leave some items in or to get them out. On item 4, let's just start at item A. It states, for the public's perception, review of recently revised standard operating guidelines to ensure compliance with and provision for industry standards. Do we want this RFP to include an assessment of our SOGs that we just created to make sure that they are up to snuff, as it were? Does anybody not want them to look at that? I guess I'd say speak now or forever hold your peace. So,
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Cruz, go ahead.
When you say industry standards, you mean PSO industry standards, presumably?
Yeah, public safety standards. Our SOGs, we have a set for the fire side and a set for the policing side. And there are industry standards, right? Best of breed practices, Director
Yes.
Birdie? Yeah.
Yep. Our policies are mostly police policies and fire policies.
Okay, perfect. So that's
And
what that
would
line
there
item
be
entails.
a need to have the overlapping because of the the uniqueness of the PSO personnel going back and forth?
if I can get
I
some
mean, I
clarity.
bring that up because Director Birdie, you said earlier that some of the advanced certificates are not needed on the police side, but if the person acting as a police officer then jumps to a fire call or is at a call for service for an accident, and then there's need for fire skills, so to speak, the advanced certifications would come in handy at some point, somewhere on some call. So this advanced certifications would be relevant for all the personnel, would they not?
Well, certifications are relevant for everyone. It's just the advanced certifications are not necessarily needed for some of the other ones. And so really those are in some of the fire leadership tasks. And if you're a public safety officer that shows up on a fire scene to work for the fire supervisor in charge, you're going to be given line firefighter duties, and you just don't have to have those advanced certifications for that. Now, if you have them from your time at fire, that's great. But it would be foolish to try and get all the police to go through, fire officer 1, fire officer 2, fire instructor 1, fire instructor 2, these advanced certifications.
So it's more administrative certificates you're talking about than
Administrative and then fire leadership.
But for this line item in particular, the standard operating guidelines, this would just be an assessment to say, hey, do these meet industry standards? Does anybody not want that in this RFP?
Can I ask a question?
Sure thing.
I guess, and I'm trying to stay real open-minded here, what is leading us to think that they're not? What is leading us to think that our staff, I mean, to me, a professional is going to review that without us telling them. Am I wrong in thinking that, Director Birdie?
Well, I guess I would just say that standard operating guidelines in the fire service and standard operating policies in police, they're the same over the whole nation. So they're very common. When we first started them, we redid them in 98 and 99, and we purchased our police manual from the the International Association of Chiefs of Police. They give you a standard policy manual. You just put the word Cedar Falls in everywhere it says department, then review them, make sure they're applicable to our city. So I would say police and fire policy across the nation are very standardized.
So from your perspective, would we not need that at all? I mean, there's no variation if they're standardized, correct? Or do we have some deviation from the standard?
Well, we have some unique ones where it'll talk about dual roles and do training.
Okay.
But basically, you don't need this 4A.
Well, I would say it's really not up to me. It's you guys are having the conversations.
I know, but did you recommend it?
Well, I probably wouldn't recommend any of this, so it's really not up to me.
Okay, and yes, I appreciate that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all. I'm just trying to get to the point of, while staying open-minded, that I just don't understand what has led us to the point, that we're wanting this. That's truly what I'm asking. I just don't know what has made us question if we need to question. You know what I mean? I know I'm stumbling on my words.
Are you saying why do a study if you don't need to do a study? Or
Let me put it this way, if I can. I think it's as innocuous to me as going to the doctor for an annual health exam. You don't have to have something completely wrong to go and do a preventative exam and just get blood work that might help you indicate a problem. That's really all this is. I don't think it has to be threatening or as contentious as some have made it, quite honestly. So that's what that would be for me, is just a double check of, hey, we just wrote these policies. Do they meet what we're intending with them? We're not saying, hey, we think that there's something wrong. But you would also, if you did think something was wrong, go to the doctor.
May I speak again?
Yeah, absolutely.
As a family practice nurse who wholeheartedly supports a wellness exam yearly, I totally get that screenings are good. This is a big screening cost to a council that's trying to get down to a 0% tax increase. So when we talk about supporting our staff, and again, I'm not trying to be closed-minded, but these are the thoughts that are going through my head, and this is an open discussion. When we're talking about supporting our staff, we have staff that we may need to consider giving a raise to, but we're going to take money that we may or may not have and spend it on a study that could possibly go to a better purpose of supporting the staff we have and giving them a better life as a Cedar Falls employee. I say that just because I got to get that off my chest. So I'm still trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish here.
Sure. I think if my take on that is we don't know exactly what the cost is going to be yet, so I don't want to be alarmed about a cost that we're not sure of. And this honestly is, again, that intermediate step of what are we even going to ask of them? If we get a proposal back that's an exorbitant fee, you're right. This council has said no to $35,000 worthwhile expenditures. So we'd probably take that up at another meeting and say, nah, this isn't going to happen at this time. So I don't want to get the cart before the horse. And I appreciate your insight, because if this is something that's exorbitant and unnecessary, then we shouldn't do it.
May I say one more thing regarding that? Even if we don't get to the point of, whatever the point is of if we hire somebody or not, we are taking somebody's time, and time is money. Also, and I know I'm repeating myself,
No.
but we're questioning I worry about if I was sitting in the position of a public safety officer and someone was constantly questioning me as I do my job, and there's not proof really to question it. Again, I worry about, in this big world of short staffness, what would that do to me mentally? And those are real things. I just called myself a family practice nurse, but guess what? I left direct patient care recently because I was done with it. I was done with all the stuff from the outside in. Who's to say that can't happen to our city staff? I sure the heck hope it doesn't. But those are things that I worry about as a citizen and as a human.
And I appreciate that concern, and it's not lost on me. I had a resident tell me that the only Dustin they know is the one that they see on Monday nights. Visiting with people face-to-face helps in a lot of regards, and I guess my opinion on that is maybe just a philosophical difference, that I haven't talked to officers that are panicked or that feel disrespected, and maybe they don't feel emboldened enough to tell us because we're the city council, for crying out loud. I get that. But I don't think, I just don't agree that our police and fire officers are feeling attacked every time we talk about, hey, are you guys protected? I had one police officer tell me that they felt, this is 2 years ago, that they felt concerned in one regard because of some of the things that hadn't been assessed from the outside. So I just disagree that everybody's up in arms about us going to bat for making sure we have the best public safety department possible. I think I would reiterate what Councilman Sayers had said. We're sticking with this model. We just want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can at it. And we've been doing it for a couple years now. At what point is it okay to review it and make sure that it's delivering on its promises? Is it this year? Is it in 3 years? Is it in 5 years? Is it after a god-awful event happens that we wish we could have prevented? There's never going to be a right time if people want to freak out about us asking questions. But to me, when people do start freaking out about asking questions, that causes me to be even more attack dog on, well, what are you trying to hide? We're not trying to hide anything. Director Birdie will tell you that. We just want to look at it and say, hey, we are doing exactly what we can, and we're improving where we didn't even think to look. There's a line of questioning that we use at Veridian. There's the little bit that we know about our world and our job proficiencies, and there's a whole lot of stuff that we know that we don't know, things that we're inexperienced about. And then there's a world that we didn't even know we don't know. That's what I'm delving into with this assessment. We're getting into that I don't know zone. We're saying, hey, we fight fires, we police, we provide emergency medical, and we do it really well. And there's a lot of things that we work on training to get better at. All of our public safety officers continuously train to improve. So they're cool with continuous improvement, and they have that drive, and I thank them for it. There's also, I think, a willing acknowledgement that there are things that they don't know that we could delve into with an external entity a little more effectively than we can with the same people that have that limited lens of their own awareness. I'll be done railing. I'll take other input at this point. Councilmember DeBoer first.
I just recommend taking A out of here. It's standard operating guide, and if it's standard, it doesn't need to be in here.
I'm okay with that. Anybody else fighting for it?
No.
Okay. Item B is review our operations to ensure that we're abiding by our standard operating guidelines. These are, again, merely ideas that I jotted in this agenda, so these are not hard and fast, but I just put in there, I would ask our RFP to cite at least 15 incident responses for both promoting accolades as well as opportunities. Anybody have any contention with those?
Well, I'd go off from what you were just talking about from your business and what a lot of other businesses do as well in the consideration of what's our risk. I'm not sure if we need a external to make a determination of risk. You know, in your business, if you're doing a risk assessment, what is our risk? And then from your report to your boss, it's here's our risk. I would imagine in the case of what we're looking for, with Director Birdie having this list already, I'd like to hear, before we go outside and spend money, and he's already doing these things, I'd like to hear what is our risk with these, and what's the assessment of it, and what's our mitigation plan for those risks.
Are you
I
asking me
wouldn't
now?
ask you to present that tonight,
No.
but I think it's fair to he's said, here's what we do every year, or here's what we do, and here's where we're at risk.
Okay.
And that's part of what the responsibilities are for those chiefs and for those directors.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Harding.
I'd like to see that presentation right now. I'm just joking.
Well, you know, one thing in the public safety business, it gets down pretty quick. Our biggest risks are over on the police side.
Yeah.
You know, pursuits, you know, death, you know, shooting, things like that. When you look at the big picture
Yeah.
of what we do.
I was totally giving you a hard time. I wanted to say, to answer, I've been thinking about this as we've been talking, and, you know, to Kelly's point, we're here tonight because this issue is political, you know, whether we want it to be or not, it is. We're here because it's been 8 years in the making, or however many, 5, 15, 20. You can go back in the history of Cedar Falls and see that it's been here. It's here. So really, I'm not an expert in public safety, and I'm not an expert in making RFPs. And, you know, I think we really just have to make the decision on, do we want to look at having an external review right now, or do we not? Because there are companies that do it, and they know what they're doing, and they'll come in and they'll look at it. And if we want that and we want to spend the money on it, then we put the vote forward and we go, yes. If we don't want that and it fails, then, well, that it is what it is. You know, we just keep moving forward. And it's not that I'm trying to, I think you put a lot of thought into this, Chairman, and I think it's great that you're being proactive, but we're going to sit here and pick every little thing apart and try to ask questions and be political and sneak around this way and that way to get it to, and really just boils down to the question, do you want to spend money on this or not? And if, we can sit here and make these guidelines until the 7, and then we could fail at, do we want to spend money on it? So I'd like to know, is this something we want to look at doing? And if it is, let's just send out a brief like, hey, what do you do and how much does it cost?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I'm at, because otherwise I couldn't tell you what to look at.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Well, I appreciate that insight, Councilman Harding, because I think similarly, and I am being political in saying we need to discuss this and decide whether or not we know what we're asking before we go on and vote on, are we going to spend money on this? Deconstructing that sentence, if we were simply trying to decide tonight, do we want to spend money on this or not? Tonight is to define what is this. And so it is a little bit political in saying we have to know what this is before we can decide whether we're going to spend money on it. We don't even know what that sum is. But we have approved a meeting to discuss and vote on whether or not we're going to have someone do an assessment. But again, we haven't defined that. So we have to know what we're talking about before we can reconvene that meeting.
I get where you're coming from, but to that I would say, in this essence, we're micromanaging the assessment company through saying, assess what we want to assess, whereas I would rather, and this is my personal preference, we don't have to do this, just say, like, if we are going to do an assessment, well then, you're an expert. We have experts here. We have experts. Let's, you tell me what you like to do, and then we can look at the cost. And I'm not opposed to putting some of these in there. I just don't want to get into micromanaging the assessment, because if we choose to go down this route, the firm says, well, this is what you asked for. Here's your X number of dollar report, and we saw a lot of other stuff, but you're not getting that, or anything. I mean, I guess I'd prefer to leave it broad and see, are we okay sending out a broad RFP, or are we not, and are we just going to continue going forward? And if we want to go through the rest of these points, I'm totally fine with that. I just, I get nervous getting real specific, that's all.
I appreciate that insight, and I would give just a slight pushback that last year when we talked about this, we tabled it, or postponed it rather, because we didn't have any framework around it. And so we hesitated at that time to select a group without telling them somewhat of what we're looking at. And now this year we're deciding to not talk about it because we aren't wanting to tell them too much with what we're looking at. I mean, at some point, you're right, it is just going to become a decision of, do we want to do this or not?
Got it.
The difficulty here is we can't, I'm not going to craft an RFP that I'm going to put Cedar Falls' name on without it being vetted. I'd actually already spoken with Administrator Gaines. So looking at item 5, to skip over some of the line by line, because we do have, in the instance of time, or in the in the interest of time tonight, to make a decision. Can we craft an RFP to send out tonight? I'm guessing that the answer is probably no with the time we have remaining. So my alternative suggestions are, do we refer this to staff to craft an RFP? Do we not waste the staff hours that it would take? Do we send this to a subcommittee and require homework to come back with something to actually deliberate and vote on? Are there other options?
I'd like to see a self-assessment to start with.
In line with the special report and those review items, and see that?
Yeah.
Got it? Mm-hmm. So I think, reflecting back to what did we want to accomplish, and take aims in that. My earlier statement, and I think most people agree with this, is that our desire up here from the council is that we have the best public safety department possible, right? I know people can take different perceptions of what is said here and what's not said here and things of that nature, but I agree that we are all Cedar Falls first, that we're all on the same team here, and that we want our citizens to be safe. In that vein, I don't have a symptom, Councilmember Dunn, that I would point at and say, hey, this is what's broken that we're trying to find. So I could be amenable to receiving the internal review findings from our ongoing special report. I could also be amenable to saying, hey, we're going to go forward with an RFP from X entity and have them tell us what they would offer before we choose to go with them or not. Councilmember DeBoer.
Was there a timeline on this special report as to when it would be done again, or when there would be follow-up on it? I mean, you said it was done in 2021.
We did in 2021 as a special report, really covering 5 years. There's been talk of quarterly reports, or quarterly reports back to the council or the Public Safety Committee. Last year, some of that I know was we probably kicked the can down the road a little bit, or there was a hold put on just as we were replacing Public Safety Director, and then that caused replacing Police Chief, and then as you know now, we're void of Fire Chief right now too. So probably some of that has been internally. If we want to do quarterly reviews, any kind of review, or if you guys get a copy of the special report and you want to drill down on an area that you're concerned about and have us report to you, of course we would welcome any of that. So.
Well, I'm sorry. It seems like a quarterly report would be pretty soon with what's going on right now with the new positions. When would you recommend? Would it like 6 months from now? It seems like quarterly would almost be like April, which would be way too soon, I think.
Well, I would of course like to get the team set. I got appointed in June of last year. Chief Howard, I believe, was probably September, October got appointed. And so if I had a choice, something down the road where we have, some more solid leadership, or we have that fire chief position filled. So, 6 months is probably very safe. And we could give you any kind of report you want, either on all 7 of the goals, or drill down on certain areas, or as was mentioned, drill down on maybe those areas of high liability or high risk, I gave a short answer there talking about risk, and really what I was thinking more of city liability. Things like pursuits and an officer-involved shooting just come with a lot of liability because you have other people involved. And so everything we do has risk to it. But those are just some that come to mind for liability, that if you talk about things that keep us up at night. So, but we could report back on anything or drill down on a goal or, items the city administrator is concerned about, or maybe the items that are the most unique to the PSO program. Some are just day-to-day police and fire, no surprises there. But there are some things we do that are unique, and that's probably where the most questions are.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Councilmember Stars.
Chief Birdie, and I call you that because that's what I'm used to calling you.
That's fine.
Even though you're chief PSO or... Anyway, you wouldn't be opposed to experts coming in and helping you do a better job if there was something you didn't see or...
No.
You know what I mean? Just
Absolutely, not opposed to it, but I think, it could be one of those things, be careful what you ask for. The dispatch center, they just did... They set aside $80,000 for a study of the dispatch center. They spent $70,000 on it. The main recommendation out of that, if you read that whole report, was they need to increase their staff by 50%. And now that's the charge they're moving out on. And so, I would expect similar type things if they come and take a look at us. Maybe not necessarily on staffing, but I was part of an RFP for a parking study years ago too.
wouldn't it be good to have somebody come in that was truly an expert? Because it seems to me it's mostly in the northern states that have this type of situation. Kalamazoo, Michigan, Wisconsin. It's
Well, there's public safety all over the United States. Well, really all over the world. There's different forms of public safety. And, we're a little unique, too, because we're separate divisions within the public safety department. And you can just go over Iowa and find police and fire departments in the same building. That might be separate, but they do things together. So we're probably a little bit of a hybrid in being between co-located police and fire departments and full-on public safety. And probably the biggest thing is we have subject matter experts as supervisors overseeing our two divisions. We don't ask one supervisor to oversee police and fire. Now, we have plenty that have the ability to do that, but we don't do that at this time. So,
But you wouldn't be opposed to somebody coming in and trying to help you?
Oh, absolutely not.
That's all. Thanks.
I think one point that I would reiterate on that too, we just received from our own racial equity task force some recommendations, and we adopted a lot of them, and in a couple cases we were able to enumerate why we couldn't do the recommendation. So I guess to me it's a lot less risky when we would be seeking recommendations, and we could flat out say, we live here in Cedar Falls, we know how we operate, thank you for the recommendation, but we aren't doing it for this rationale. So there's, I guess, a line of thought for me that says it's not as threatening, but you're right, the Consolidated Communications Center cost increased, a lot, and now the EMA issue is causing problems. So there is a risk involved in opening up this can of worms, so I acknowledge that this is a conversation that's touchy. When would you say, and what entity would we utilize to look at our emergency medical response in the same vein that ISO looks at fire, and then subsequently policing? Is there an entity that you can engage with to prevent or to provide a report in that vein?
Not that I know of. Back in the 80s, we had a city-owned hospital and city fire department. The fire department did the paramedic service. That service moved over to our city-owned hospital in the 1980s. It stayed with them all the way through the 80s up until now. Through the 1990s, our fire never assisted on medical calls. Our police did, even though we were only first responders. It really didn't make much sense. So then in the 2000s, firefighters became EMTs. Fire departments started assisting on the medical calls. Police departments stopped assisting on the medical calls, really because of call volume. It made more sense. They had more capacity than the police did. So, fast forward to modern day, we've got very great service from Mercy One Cedar Falls. That's all we've ever known for all of us that have been there. I don't know who would look at them and who would examine them if you want to do that. So that would really have to be somebody with an expertise in emergency medical care.
Okay.
But also it's Mercy One Cedar Falls that provides that service. We don't provide that.
So in this assessment, we wouldn't even be bringing that in scope because it's not us. We'd be looking at police and fire from this RFP if it were to go out.
Well, I think we'd have to really just look at police and fire because I don't know how we could order an assessment of
Mercy One.
a third party, yeah.
I appreciate that clarification.
Now, they could look at maybe the type of calls we go to and assist and maybe do an external, take a look at what they do, but again, it's, standards used all over the nation and how they operate. So we have a good relationship with them. We meet with them all the time with their leadership over issues or how they operate or how we operate. So we have a great working relationship, but, they run the paramedic service. So.
Okay. Sorry to keep putting you on the spot, but so we don't really have the ability to assess our emergency medical response anyway, nor an entity to do it. Is there any such thing on the policing side to the level of ISO, that external audit for fire? Is there an entity like that for police, or is it only responsive investigations on the policing side?
The only thing I know is that, some police departments and fire departments are accredited. So you could have an accreditation service. Our police department did that back in the late 80s. They actually assigned a person to do that, and that's really all that person did for 3 years, was get the accreditation in line. We ended up with a policy manual that was 3-inch binders. We truthfully didn't hardly do anything that was probably in those policy manuals, but we were an accredited department there for several years. And then we didn't see benefit in that, and I would say sometime in the 90s, we stopped being accredited, took the stickers off the cars, and then we started operating under a set of policies that we bought from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So I really don't know of another group to come in like the ISO. And the ISO, too, and of course City Administrator Gaines could tell you, they look at more than just our fire department. They look at other departments in the city, too, have a rating. So, and even the rating that we say we're a 3 or a 4, or whatever we are, which we've been through the years, is 40% fire department operations, 40% water supply, 20% dispatch. So even the ISO rating, the fire department operations is only 40% of that score.
So in that vein of what we control and what we don't, we could be 100% in everything we do and still be getting a B at 80% because the other 20 is consolidated dispatch.
Yes, it's a lot more complicated than that, but yeah, you're right. One could carry the other a little bit. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I came in with a goal that hopefully we would have some direction on a request for proposal to send out, but I also don't want to make the mistake I have in the past of making my own motion. Are there other sentiments in that regard? Councilmember DeBert.
Well, how about unless this would be too difficult of a time frame, Director Birdie, but that we do by August 15th an update to the 2021 special report with the additional items or updates in it like you suggested, and then see when we get that done where we would want to go from there.
Second that.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded to receive a response presentation, excuse me.
My question was simply too, is that too short of a time frame for you?
No.
Start with the question.
No, I would say that's not too short of a time frame. And really what I envision doing would be to make sure we distribute this, that you guys have it. Maybe we as a staff make a suggestion on what we want to review, where we have the most potential concerns, and then also let you take a look at it too. Because some of the things are like vehicles, buildings, things, things that are pretty simple, and then maybe have you guys tell us which ones you want to hear about. Just a thought.
Okay, so is that motion made?
Mr. Chairman?
Hang on 1 second, I'm going to double check with Sue.
Yeah, it
Is
was
that
a
an official motion
and a
now that the
second,
date's
yes.
okay? And a second, okay. Councilmember Cruz, comment on the motion on the...
Well, I got a comment or a question on 4C. I was offline there for a few minutes. I lost phone contact. Did you discuss 4C in any great length?
No, Councilmember Cruz, we, while you were offline, it sounds like we went basically from item 4B and then started discussing item 5, what was the feasibility of actually getting an RFP crafted and or approved. So it went through several different meandering paths, and where we are now is discussing having an internal assessment.
Correct.
And
Okay.
responses to our
I'm
currently
then.
approved and adopted special report by August
Right.
15th.
We did talk, Chairman.
Go ahead.
We did talk briefly about assessing emergency medical service and kind of
Did I
determined that
finish my question?
we couldn't
Correct.
do that because we don't control it in the city, and we can't hardly dictate assessing an entity that we have no control over. So we briefly talked
Chairman?
about it.
Yep. Did you catch that, Councilmember Cruz?
Yeah, I think that I would like to see something discussed internally then, if we're going to assess ourselves, on the level of EMT training, paramedic training, even the ambulance service. In years past, it was, I think the term was embedded in fire stations possibly, or what works best for efficiency in the viewpoint of hospitals. And, you know, since you have a call for service for a car accident and somebody's injured, what medical assistance we can give from the police side and or fire, and then incorporate that handoff to an ambulance that arrives and the paramedics. And if we had some personnel of the PSOs, also paramedics, and that sort of thing. So we have some control over that, because that's a big component of the training is the EMT.
Correct.
I'd like to see something incorporated internally in that.
Okay. I think in regards to this particular motion, I don't know that the special report had it included for a specific line item for the certification. We were reminded earlier today via email, Mayor Green had developed a tracking metric of some sort to talk about the different certifications that we have so that we can know how efficient we are and how protected we are. Could we ask for an amendment to that motion to include some kind of a metric,
Well, I think it's
maybe in that line?
It's actually in Goal 3, talks about training certifications. So I think with what Director Birdie had said about adding to by what the director might have offered, that kind of is included in this number 3, so I don't think you need an amendment.
I see it's included for police and fire. Would you agree that it should be touched on for emergency medical response as well? I just don't want to
I would
have
agree.
a consensus that doesn't provide that insight. So Director Birdie, I'd like to hear about police, fire, and EMS.
Yes, and that's what I intended when I put that on there too, because
Okay, perfect.
EMT, they're certified through the state of Iowa, so.
Okay, so the motion that as it stands is fine to hear that report back in August, potentially. Other comments on that motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilmember Sayers?
that doesn't really get us to where we're trying to get. We're trying to have an outside source come in and look at the way we're doing our PSO situation, and for us to judge ourselves is a little like asking the waiter if the steak's good. I'm not saying these guys are gonna fudge on what they have, but they're maybe a little cloudy and want to, everybody wants to look good. I'd just like to see an expert. I think maybe only needs to be one person come in and do a little coaching if that's what it takes, but I'd like to see something from outside come in and help us to be the best PSO program we can possibly be. That's all.
I think I'd be inclined to agree that that is the most palatable for me, and I think we're at a bit of an impasse with this particular issue. So the goal being making sure that we have the best public safety provision possible. I think a report back of how we're doing internally is also a palatable mid-step for me.
Yeah, I think it's a first step, because, again, it's going to help us define where we are. I've got faith in our staff to come back to us, and just like Faith and Chase to come back and tell us what the conditions of our roads are, or the services we get from there. So I'd be in favor of moving forward with the August 15th update, and then revisit if necessary
Okay.
for an external.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Schultz. I don't want to make the mistake of precluding public comment since we do have a motion for action on the floor. If there's anybody for public comment for having our public safety director provide a response to update us on how we're executing our special report, our public safety special report, feel free. The floor is available for public comment at this time. Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Oh, we do have one. Go ahead. Sorry. I didn't see the gallery fill up. On the motion on the floor to have Public Safety Director Birdie or staff provide an update on how we are performing our Public Safety Special Report. That's the item that we're promoting, or that we are taking action on tonight. If you'd like to speak on that item, feel free.
Can I give the same talk now and also at the regular city council meeting?
I would say as long as it pertains to the particular motion on the floor now. I mean, I'm not going to stop you from speaking if it's relevant to this. If it's prepared for the full council meeting for other action, I would say that it's probably best there. But I'm not going to say you aren't allowed to speak.
Well, as a citizen, I feel that there was so much more that needs to be investigated in public safety. I feel like there were two separate issues, and they were treated differently, and the citizens deserve to know how there could be overpay of two separate public works people, and they were treated so differently, and especially during COVID. And I believe that most businesses got money to help fund people that went home and couldn't work, and probably the city got money to employees that couldn't work. Where did that money go? What was it used for? Why were these issues treated so differently, where two people were promoted in one department and two people were forced into retirement in an ugly manner in another department? And so I don't think this should just be a review of how things work. But if two people, especially if this can be treated in this manner in I consider it a newly developed department during COVID, people can be treated like this and it be okay with everyone. There's a real problem. I got to sit here last week and hear people talking about kicking to the curb the fire chief. And there's just something terribly wrong, and the fact that it does not remain here, the fact that there are individuals, either the mayor, city administrators, that will allow this to happen, that there needs to be a lot wider review of what's going on other than this,
1 minute remaining.
Other than this small detail. I think the citizens deserve that. So,
Thank you, Ms. Stahl.
by the way, I've been here, Tammy Stahl, 1009 Lakeshore Drive.
Thank you. All right. Other public comment for or against the review of our public safety special report? And I apologize, I didn't get it before, but name and address for the record, ma'am.
Linda Minicus, 1626 West Lone Tree Road. I do have a couple of comments. Number one, I did not care for an article that came out in the Courier regarding Boswick, Chief Boswick, where it said that he was not allowed on the property, city premises anymore, unless there was something that he needed to be on the premises for, but yet we were paying him X amount of dollars, $156,000, $165,000, whatever it was, to oversee our PSOs. I just have, how can we show such little disrespect to him and our officers at the same time? Why would you put him in charge of giving any advice to our PSOs or their safety? That's one thing. The other thing I was also very interested in is this program that you're going to put together, this presentation, if it would include the future, such as when Sartori closes down or the State Patrol office on First Street moving was discussed at one time, excuse me, that there would be a potential fire department station put there. Do we have that type of information included in this presentation that you're asking for? That's all.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Minicus. Any others for this item before we take a vote on? Okay. All right, bringing it back to council at this point. Councilmember DeBoer.
Just in answer to her question, I think
sure.
that the location is covered in that goal 4.
Correct. in the public safety special report, future locations are covered in that report. So I believe that can be included pretty easily. Go ahead. Where it would be housed would be covered in that, I do believe. But again, as we've discussed earlier, Mercy One provides our ambulance service, so it wouldn't be something that we have control over at this point. So, okay, bringing it back to council. Any other final comments before we take a vote on this item? Okay.
Chairman, can you repeat the item?
Yeah, and I want to make sure we have it correct. I believe the motion on the floor is to receive a presentation on, as an update on our adherence to or execution of the public safety special report by August 15th of 23. Is that correct? Okay. All right. It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
opposed, nay.
Nay.
Hey.
Sounds 5-2. That passes. I will call us, bring us to adjournment, and we will reconvene at 7 p.m. for our regular council meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.